Welcome to the Fantasy 40 Podcast with your host, John Dabari.
I mean, I can beat the shit out of Hollywood Brown if you'd like.
Matt Walker.
Like the DK Metcalf of running back.
And Andrew Burke.
I love Hakeem Butler, actually. He's starting to grow on me.
Remember to like, rate, subscribe on Podbean, iTunes, Stitcher, and Spotify. Follow the guys on Twitter at the Fantasy 40. Enjoy the show.
Welcome to the Fantasy 40 Podcast. We are back. Myself, Andrew Burke, John Dabari, and Matt Walker. Today is the day, but before we get started, let's just give a big shout out to our partners over at the Full-Time Fantasy Network. What do they got going over there, Walker? The FFWC. They got a bunch of stuff. So go check them out at fulltimefantasy.com. Before we get going, it's all 32. You ready to go, Matt?
I certainly am. Put a tweet out the other day that no one liked or responded to that let people know we're going to be going by division. So for those of you that don't know, we're not doing 32 individual episodes. That was fun last year, but unsustainable given the three of us actually having lives outside of this podcast. So we're just going to try and do a quick 40 by division going forward. So knock it down to 8 episodes instead of 32. So excited to do it, but guess we'll see how this thing turns out.
Yep. John, everything going good? You ready to dive in and start this thing off, right?
You take what you get. We got divisions for you this year. Next year, we'll just do 2 conference shows, and that'll be it.
Oh, yeah. We're going to break them down in 40 minutes, too.
Keep whittling this down.
2021, we're just talking about the Super Bowl champs.
Exactly. We're just going to talk about who we're picking to go to the Super Bowl. But so what we're going to do, fellas, is I'll start a little 10-minute timer, and we'll just go down the list. And today we drew the AFC North. Whoop, whoop. So that'll be a good time, which is the Ravens, the Bengals, the Browns, and the Steelers. And the Browns were one of our more popular episodes last year, so maybe I'll let us go a little over the allotted time on that team, but we'll see. So let's go. I'm going to start the timer, and we are going to do the Ravens now. So Baltimore Ravens. Walker, who's one of their highly sought-after rookies that you could be going after in Dynasty or Redraft that might have some value?
Yeah, I mean, we'll probably have to clarify this going forward. I was very redraft focused on this one as far as the all 32 is concerned, because I do like some of the receivers that are growing on me from a dynasty perspective, but from a redraft perspective, Justice Hill, I think 4th round running back that they drafted, it's going to be a compliment to Mark Ingram this year is pretty appealing. From a redraft perspective, the Ravens ran the ball 547 times last year, which was first in the NFL, and I think their desire is to continue to lead the league in rushing attempts. Lamar Jackson and Mark Ingram can only account for so much of that. I can see Justice Hill having 100 to 150 carries this year, and he's a decent pass catcher as well. I think he's someone that is quickly growing on me given this Ravens backfield.
Yeah, that's the only name I've been seeing pop. But do you have anybody else different, Dabari?
I mean, we went with rookies here, so I like Miles Boykin better than I like Hollywood Brown, if I'm going to pick one of the rookies to kind of step up a little bit this year. But I also had Justice Hill, paraphrasing everything Walker said. It's a team that is very run-heavy. They did bring in Mark Ingram, but, that kind of volume, you're going to need to spread it around. And everyone that was a big Kenneth Dixon fan, I think we're going to see Justice Hill end up being everything we wanted Kenneth Dixon to be, because he's a good pass catcher out of the backfield too.
And John is speaking from personal experience.
Oh,
the biggest Kenneth Dixon fan that I know.
Yeah,
you saw me. I was cutting him in leagues finally this year. The Justice Hill draft pick put the final dagger in my dreams.
All right. Well,
yeah, I mean, Dixon might not make the team.
No, probably not.
On. He better, because I have him jotted down for something else. And then you kind of touched on Hollywood. Before we move on, are we expecting anything from this guy this year?
Hollywood Brown, I am.
I mean, if we want to jump
I know
ahead,
he's – go ahead. Oh. Go ahead. I know you hate him. So
I have him. I put him under my we're gonna look at busts for each teams, and he is my bust. I don't see it with his size. I don't see it with the injury. I don't see it with a run-heavy team. I don't see it with Lamar Jackson. Nothing about him screams success for me long-term, and sure as shit not for this year.
Gotcha.
I mean, the John Brown corollary is concerning, as Brown is a deep threat, but I think he's more than that. And he is slight of frame, and that is concerning. But in this new age NFL where they prohibit big hits and it's open spaces and run after the catch, if Lamar Jackson can progress the collateral they contributed to Hollywood Brown, he's someone that I'm turning my opinion on. I was with you, John. I'm just like, there's no way this type of individual can last in the NFL. If he can keep his foot right and not fall victim to the floppy foot syndrome, then I think he can actually be a player in this limited pass offense. He's the big play guy that can have those 50-plus yard touchdowns. So I don't want him this year, but I think he has upside.
I'm not comparing him, but I am comparing him. But, I mean, John Brown was off to a wicked good stat last year with Flacco. I mean, especially if you had him in best ball, because I still didn't trust, even with the start he had, rolling him out in redraft. But if he had best ball, I think Hollywood would be a decent pick, kind of like Deshaun Jackson-esque if you're doing best ball. So, but I could also see that bust potential. So free agent-wise, they went out and got Eric Weddle. Or not, they let him go, and they brought in Earl Thomas, excuse me. They didn't really do much else, but is this going to affect anything, Walker, in your IDP leagues?
Yeah, I like Earl Thomas coming back from that broken leg. The safety position for the Ravens is something that you want to get a piece of if you can. Like you said, they had Eric Weddle there the last 2 seasons, I believe, before they let him go and replace him with Earl Thomas. Their defense took a lot of shots this year. They lost Terrell Suggs. They lost Darius Smith. They lost Eric Weddle. Probably others that I'm not thinking of. Very unproven, but somehow the Ravens find a way to be productive on defense. But I think Earl Thomas is going to be a top-end safety, from an IDP perspective this year, like he always has been, but tackle monster.
Yeah, I'm on board with Earl Thomas being a playmaker this year. I'm a big fan of his, since he came out of college, and I think this is a great spot for him as long as he stays healthy. Somebody else that they brought in on defense was Shane Ray, kind of a off the edge pass rush specialist. Didn't do much while he was in Denver, but kind of came into the league with a little bit of hype. So he's somebody who might be able to replace a little bit of that productivity that was lost through free agency. And then the big free agent that you missed, Burke, going right to IDP, Mark Ingram.
Yes.
And for a team that wants to run heavy volume, Ingram is a model citizen for that type of program. So I'm anticipating a pretty decent year out of him.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because I spaced on him as well. My mind went to right to the Ravens defense just because that's what I think when I think Ravens. And interestingly enough, running the ball is secondary, and Mark Ingram should be poised for a pretty big year.
All right, we got to speed up. We're a little over halfway done, but real quick to give people some perspective is where would you be drafting in redraft formats Mark Ingram? Because that's a good point. Before or after Latavius Murray? Because he seems to be a hot commodity right now.
I think they'll probably be similarly priced. I could see either of them as low-end RB2s or flex plays. So we're talking like 5th round, 6th round on Ingram, probably a little lower on Latavius.
Okay. If I went wide receiver heavy to start a draft, I would be very happy to come out of it with Ingram and Latavius Murray in the later rounds.
Okay.
My RB1 and 2.
All right. Well, let's get to them sleepers. Walker, why don't you go first?
Yeah, I mean, there's super sleepy is our boy Boxcar Willie Snead. Shout outs to Derek Brown. Currently wide receiver 89 in Fantasy Pros PPR rankings. He is the only holdover in this entire wide receiver core that Lamar Jackson has to throw to. And we already mentioned Miles Boykin and Hollywood Brown being rookies. Rookies hardly ever are consistent contributors. So who's it going to be? It's going to be the tight ends and probably slot Willie Snead that could potentially see 80, 90, even more targets this year in that limited passing game. But I think he could return double that value and be in the wide receiver 40 range by the time the season's over in PPR. So I think he's just stealing that wide receiver 89.
I think the value is definitely there. But I was going to use Dixon as my sleeper, but John already tore him to shreds. So we'll just move on, John, and hear yours.
Exact same mindset as Walker, but I went with Chris Moore. They've kept Chris Moore on that roster for a long time. You know, if you read a lot of the sound bites coming out of the offseason stuff, they're happy with his development over the offseason. For all the reasons Walker likes Willie Snead, I'm going Chris Moore because we're saying sleeper, and he's even sleepier.
Yeah, he's below it, but yeah, can't argue it. Either one of them, you know, have to be better than what they're.
Got to be somebody, right?
One of them has to catch balls. I mean, that's just it.
Yep. Well, that's if they throw it. But let's go to breakout. Dabari, why don't you lead things off here?
I mentioned his name earlier. I went with Justice Hill. Not very exciting. I was going to go Mark Andrews because I love him, but I think he's kind of on the radar, so that's why I went with Justice Hill.
Well, the seat's taken because Walker, looks like you have the one and only Mark Andrews, no?
I do. He's my guy this year. He's my 2019 tight end man crush. He's currently tight end 20 on Fantasy Pros. I think he is a tight end 1 all day this year, probably ringing in the 8 to 12 range. So he's still, in my opinion, severely undervalued and still has breakout potential. But we saw a glimpse of what he could be, and that in large part was with Lamar Jackson throwing the ball. I'm a huge Mark Andrews fan. This offense is going to cater to that tight end, and we could be on the verge of a breakout. He could be top 5. There's no reason he can't. I mean, tight end's largely touchdown dependent, and if he can get to 8 touchdowns, he can creep into that top 5. I mean, I'm not going to look and see where that fell last year, but I got to think he can be better than what Austin Hooper was last year. Just put it that way.
All right. And we'll go to the bust. We already know yours, Dabari, Mr. Kenneth Dixon.
No, Hollywood Brown.
Oh,
no. You want to take a shot at
Dixon's
Hollywood Brown.
going to be on the team.
I have Dixon.
What's John's intro? I could shit on Hollywood Brown.
I have Dixon written down for every category in mine.
Do this every episode.
Dixon has to be something. I went with, I don't have one, to Hayden Hurst, because if I'm going to say that Mark Andrews can break out, how can the tight end they took before him in last year's draft not be considered a bust? He put on like 20 or 30 pounds. He's going to end up trying to replace what's his name? Who's the guy they just overpaid to be their blocking tight end from the University of Delaware? Nick Boyle. Nick Boyle. He's going to replace Nick Boyle in 3 years as the blocking tight end. So he is a bust given his draft capital because he's the second best tight end on his own team.
And that was the nice loud timer. So
I like it.
Yeah,
we're getting a work call.
Nope.
Now I know what to expect.
Yep, that was a little beep beep. So we'll just
record.
Yeah. Oh, records real quick. We got to bust them out. I said 9-7. What do you got, Dabari?
I have 10-6.
I went 8-8. I think slight regression. That defense is going to take a step back.
All right, I'm right in the middle of you two, so I don't feel too bad. All right, let's go.
Man sandwich.
Man sandwich. Man sandwich.
That's where you want to be.
Speaking of man sandwiches, we're about to get into the Cincinnati Bengals. We kind of already covered every single one of their players on our Pet Cemetery episode because we were trying to bring the whole team to life. Sorry, but John just cracking me up talking about man sandwiches. He's got a.
I was trying to figure out that smooth transition.
I couldn't do it.
We didn't get there.
A sandwich is a sandwich and a manwich is a meal. But
at Walker's, that's where you want to be, right in the middle.
All right, but
we got our clip.
Like I was saying, we kind of broke down this whole team, so we're gonna probably fly through this. Rookies, go ahead, Dabari. You can start off first.
What are Bengals now?
Yep,
Bengals.
Man, they didn't really attack too much on offense. So flip a coin, Travion Williams or Rodney Anderson. I think Williams is probably going to use more year one as a passing down guy. So I guess Travion Williams with very little excitement around it.
And Walker?
Yeah, I went the other way. I went with Rodney Anderson, and it's because neither of those guys has value unless the person in front of them gets injured. And I think there's a stronger likelihood that Mixon gets injured than Gio because we have seen it before. And if Rodney Anderson is healthy, when or if Joe Mixon gets injured, I think he can be a short-term superstar for this team. I'm a huge Rodney Anderson fan. I just think injuries have just derailed his career. So he's someone I'm interested in, but it's injury dependent.
Yeah.
Neither of those guys have standalone value on redraft.
Hopefully he pans out a little bit better than our boy Mark Walton. Let's keep it bushing, pushing. I mean, I'm just fumbling over everything, these damn Bengals. Free agent wise, I didn't see anything. Walker, did you?
They did nothing.
I wrote none. Yeah, they just stayed the course. They kept players around and drafted players. So,
Got a guard.
They did get who'd they get?
Doesn't even matter. A guard.
Well, listen, they drafted Jonah Williams, and that was supposed to help their offensive line, and now he's out for the year with a rotator cuff. I think they had a guy retire, if I'm not mistaken, who was one of their starters at guard or center. So if anything, they went the wrong way as far as the offseason is concerned. They might have wanted to make a couple more moves. So little to be desired as far as offseason moves for those Cincinnati Bengals, which should not be surprising because they're the Bengals.
Yeah, and I think last year when we were doing the All 32, we were kind of getting close to the end at this point. So we're starting it when camp's about to start or has started. So, maybe they make another move, but as it stands, nothing happened. Let's go to our sleepers, and Debar, you can lead off here.
Sleeper, kind of based on ADP, not so much name value, but my man Tyler Eifert, he's going in the very back end, and we've seen it when he's been healthy and on the field. He has been a tight end one. So for me, he's someone I'm targeting late in drafts. I think he can grossly outperform his ADP. Obviously, it's all depending on health, though.
All right. And Walker.
Yeah, listen, I brought him up a few episodes ago, and the stats shocked the Fantasy 40 community, and mine is John Ross, who's currently his wide receiver 79 in Fantasy Pros ADP. And if this offense takes any sort of step forward, and given his playmaking ability, albeit limited thus far in the NFL, there's no reason that a third-year quote-unquote breakout can't occur for Mr. John Ross. So I would easily have him probably 20 spots higher in my personal wide receiver rankings. There's no reason he should be outside the top 50 or 60 wide receivers. I
love both of those just based off ADP. You guys you can get in the later rounds. I mean, I don't want to say it's a sleeper, but I mean, people are sleeping on AJ Green. Obviously, he's 30. Injury concerns, but I still think he's going a lot later than he should be. So,
agreed. I traded a first round dynasty pick for AJ Green, and he's my wide receiver 3 in the league, and it was a later first and an IDP, but. Give me that all day. I just utterly disrespected his entire career, and injuries are the only thing keeping that guy from being a wide receiver 1. So he gives you 13 plus games. He's going to return value. And he's probably going in like the 3rd round right now. I mean, it's insulting.
Yeah, I totally agree there. Let's go to our breakouts. We already know yours, Walker, but go ahead and tell the people.
Yep. Potential RB run overall, Joe Mixon. He's taken a few shots, as I said, with losing some offensive line support that I was really banking on with my Joe Mixon 2019 breakout. But even as RB9 right now, there's certainly one running back I would take Mixon over in front of him at RB9, and we'll talk about that gentleman later on. But if any offensive innovation comes to Cincinnati this year with Zach Taylor, using him more in the passing game, I'm not afraid of Gio's usage because I think they can coexist. Mixon is definitely in the top 6 running backs for me, and I truly do believe he has RB1 potential. So if I can get him at RB9, I still think there's quote-unquote breakout for someone I think that can lead the league.
Yeah, I'm there with you. He seems to be a lot of talk, this preseason polls comparing Joe Mixon to whatever running back. And not that many people are as high as you, but I'm excited to see it.
Well, before we move on, just a quick Twitter poll that I put out yesterday just to see where people's thoughts lied as I put the 4 primary running backs in this division out there and said, who are we going to talk about the most, whether it be good or bad? And Joe Mixon led the 241 votes with 42% of the vote. James Conner was a distant second at 26%. So be interested if people thought the good or the bad, or they just know that I'm going to inevitably talk about them. So they were playing the odds.
I'm kind of sad that it wasn't James Conner so we could bash him, but we'll get there.
Oh, we can.
I know. I see his name on the list. You're not getting out of here, James Conner. We're going to put you in the bedroom with Melvin Gordon. But let's hear yours, John.
I got nobody. You look at this roster, who's going to break out on this team? fucking nobody. This team is garbage on paper. I don't see anybody having a better year than you can expect. If you want to throw a dart, rookie linebacker Jermaine Pratt out of North Carolina State, I believe. This is a team that needs playmakers on defense, especially at linebacker. Pratt may be able to come in and put up some high tackle totals if he ends up getting the starting gig. But yeah, I don't see anybody on this team that would be a breakout.
Isn't that kind of, the point? Like how the Jaguars were the year when Bortles was like QB8 or something. You know, you want to have a shitty defense, and you want guys like John Ross and AJ Green, Joe Mixon, especially because they can catch the ball out of the backfield. But, you know, they're going to be in shootouts or, you know, playing from behind trying to make something happen. So
Burke, call the red rifle breakout. Call it.
Andy Dalton. I think I already called it earlier. I was like, people fucking sleeping on him. He's going to be in the top 14. That's as far as I would go with it, though.
Can't even give him QB1. You just fringy him right there. Like, I still
might as well say top 16 and just make him a top half quarterback.
Yeah, still the Mendoza line.
But that's another guy that could be put in the sleeper category because he's being drafted at, like, I think it was QB 29 last month. So I haven't checked the latest. And, I mean, there's some worse guys going before him. So don't forget what the Red Rocket has done and our bust. DeBarre pretty much said everyone, but do you have a certain guy, John?
Yeah, I think people are a little too high on Tyler Boyd. He just got a nuke 4-year contract, I believe. But a lot of his production last year was because A.J. Green missed significant time. Eifert was out. I just don't see how he can return value that people are expecting this year because everything just fell in place for him to have a good year last year. And I'm a huge fan. I really liked him coming out of college, but I just think people are too hyped up on him this year. I think he'll be a fine regular football player, but for fantasy, I'm fading him this year.
Kind of like a Mohamed Sanu, who used to be a Bengal, but you know, he just kind of makes his living and doesn't do anything too crazy out of the ordinary. Walker?
Yeah, I mean, John, as anyone who listens to the podcast knows, John prints out paper and writes on it, so we're not privy to his answers, but he can certainly see everything that I wrote on the interwebs. And I wrote Tyler Boyd, who's wide receiver 27 overall, Fantasy Pros PPR, expert consensus ranking. And I agree. I mean, just to your point, John, and only because I've heard this, I haven't done the research, is actually Tyler Boyd was better when A.J. Green was in the lineup than out statistically, which was ironic, but did kind of, have a third-year breakout. But to be a fringy wide receiver 2/flex, I'm not there either, especially if I think John Ross can, return value on the 79. So I'm not trusting. I would never take Tyler Boyd as my wide receiver 2. And I don't know that I'd be happy with him as my flex. So I'm there, bust, but within reason. I think he's, like you said, a good wide receiver. I just don't think he's a top 27 wide receiver.
All right, and that summed it up. It was perfect. Now we just got to do the records real quick, and we will keep pushing forward. Let's let you go first, Walker.
I went with 5-11. They were 6-10 last year, and I think they're a worse team. So I just knocked them down a peg and went to 5-11. I do think that benefits the fantasy outlook of a lot of these players. As you said, they're going to be chasing points a lot, which is something that you want to look for, from your fantasy players.
All right, and DeBarre, what are you thinking?
I, too, went with 5-11, and I'm not just guessing. I printed out an NFL full schedule, and at work a couple nights ago, I actually went game by game, so all my records could be true.
So I did 7-9 just because I took almost the whole team to the fantasy graveyard and dug them back up. So I think they can maybe eke out 7 because they kind of contradict what I said in previous episodes. So I'm going to go with 7-9. And let's move to Cleveland, a team that everyone's so high on. It scared me off of a lot of guys, but pretty excited to talk about this one. So did they do anything in the draft on the offensive side of the ball to start with? And then we'll hit the defensive side. John?
Nothing on offense, but the one defensive player that I'm kind of excited to see, it's not necessarily, depending on your scoring, an IDP powerhouse position, but at cornerback, Greedy Williams from LSU, a lot of people had as the top cornerback in the draft, and then he kind of fell just because of his size. It was size concerns. He's like 5'10"-ish and like 180-ish pounds. I might be a little off, but he's a little fella. So nobody really was interested, and he fell a bit in the draft, and they took a shot on him. And if he's as good as they think, as much as people are excited about this Browns offense, Denzel Ward was awesome last year. If Greedy Williams is, 90% as good as people thought he was on tape before they started seeing the measurables, they could have two of the best young corners in the NFL for the next, 4 or 5 years. So that could be a real game changer there, at least, being able to shut down teams' 1 and 2 receivers.
To your point on Greedy Williams, I think a lot of his knocks were the fact that he does not like to tackle people, and he plays professional football. But his combine numbers were 6'2", 185. So I think you shorted him on the height, but he is a leaner individual. I, too, went to their secondary, but I went with Sheldrick Redwine at the safety position since they shipped Jabril Peppers out of town in the Odell Beckham trade. I think there's a spot for Redwine to step right in, and I always prefer my safeties over my cornerbacks unless it's position-specific in IDP. So Sheldrick Redwine is someone I'm interested in, and then there's also Sione Takitaki from the linebacker position. Jeez. With Jamie Collins no longer in Cleveland, back, I believe, with the Patriots. There's a void that could potentially be filled by Takitaki.
Are you sure that the Browns aren't just drafting like my favorite things, red wine and Takis? I mean, you got me going over here. Let's move on.
Where you're at.
Let's move on.
A lot of people like Mac Wilson better than Takitaki, and they took him 2 rounds earlier.
They took Takitaki way before the Maxter. He went like the 6th.
It's the first time I've said Taki out loud. I've read it multiple times, and it makes me very happy.
I could not control
way better than QTA.
It is.
And let's not just glaze over that this dude's name is Sheldrick Redwine. How good is that?
My mouth started watering when you guys said his name.
Red wine.
So we're definitely I'm on board with those. Let's go to the free agents. And probably one of the biggest splashes this offseason we all know is Mr. Odell Beckham. Walker, I'm pretty sure you're very high on him. You have him in your Scott Fishbowl team, if I recall correctly. So what are you expecting in redraft this year from this guy?
Yeah, went with the Patrick Mahomes, Odell Beckham turn at the 112 spot. And I think I said on that recap podcast that I think Beckham has wide receiver 1 upside in this Browns offense. I think it's much debate the fact that he's now getting passes from the best quarterback in his NFL career. Eli Manning is highly overrated at his peak and was certainly not at his peak during any point of Beckham's career. Beckham's been propping him up for the last couple seasons. Just due to his insane athletic ability and after the catch prowess. So put him with a quarterback that's deadly accurate and aggressive. Beckham could have a otherworldly season in his debut for the Cleveland Browns. And he just came out and said that his goal was 10 more years and 23,000 yards, which means he is shooting to pass Jerry Rice as the all-time receiving yards leader. That is a motivated man, and I am excited to see what Beckham can do with Baker in Cleveland. That is a deadly combination.
I mean, it seems to me that he's kept his head clean. There's no pizza and cocaine videos with a chick in the hotel room this offseason. So I think he's, trying to change. His hair is no longer blonde. Maybe we see a new Odell grown up a little bit more because obviously the talent's there. I mean, there's always some video of him doing twirls in the air and catching the ball backwards with one hand. So I'm pretty excited. John, who do you got?
I went to the defensive side. They brought in Sheldon Richardson, defensive tackle. I think he was with Minnesota last year. That defensive line is pretty damn impressive on paper. You've got Myles Garrett, and they brought in Olivier Vernon on the ends. And in the middle, you got Ogunjobi.
Ogunjobi. Good job.
And now Sheldon Richardson. That's a hell of a front four, especially if Vernon can be healthy and kind of return to what we saw when he was at his peak. So I think Richardson really makes that line way better.
I mean, they have been actually killing the draft the last, what would you say, 3 years? Or is that too far of a stretch? I mean,
well, it depends who you talk to. The anti-Sashi crowd will tell you no.
Right. So, all right, let's move on to this sleeper section. I'll have to start with you, Walker. I want to hear your reasoning.
Yeah, I mean, there's not much sleeping in Cleveland anymore. You can't go with Odell. I don't like Jarvis Landry. I'm not sure that I believe in Njoku, and Nick Chubb's kind of already been realized. So who's kind of still sleepy that has upside? And I just went with Antonio Callaway. Currently listed as wide receiver 74 on Fantasy Pros ECR, so just a little bit above John Ross. He had some big games last year. I think he's going to be a forgotten man from defenses as they try and script for me in redraft, but certainly has upside. And God forbid if Beckham gets injured again, which has occurred in the last couple seasons, Callaway falls right back into the role that he had last year.
So I went with a different direction, but off the same premise. I went with Rashad Higgins because I think he's a big body guy that, can get it done. And this is all off injuries. I mean, you're right. And there's not too many sleepers on the offensive side of the ball. So instead of going Callaway, I went with the more experienced guy in Higgins. Also, another guy you could probably get super late in best ball that, might give you a few games. John?
I went super deep. I went with somebody Walker was a big fan of heading into this offseason. Demetrius Harris, free agent, brought in from the Chiefs last year. If Njoku goes down, Harris is a pretty dynamic athlete. It'd be interesting to see him get some reps as the tight end one on this team. Might have the team run some 2 tight end sets. We could see Harris possibly get some work in the red zone and kind of come out of nowhere, especially if you're in deep 2 tight end leagues, of which I'm unfortunately in some. You need guys like him to round out your roster, and he's got upside.
Yeah, it's kind of like maybe they're getting tired of Njoku not be able to hold his own blocking, and, Harris, I could see him getting more snaps overall. So that's a good one. I didn't even cross my mind. Let's go to your breakout, John.
Kind of with the same position here. I went Njoku. I mean, he was a tight end one last year. Obviously, everyone knows who he is. And this team, kind of like you said with the sleeper, this is probably the most hyped team this year in this offseason anyway. So it's hard to pick out sleepers and breakout guys. But I think Njoku gets a lot of red zone work. I think he sees the touchdowns. I don't think he's necessarily at the reception volume, given what they've done on offense and the rest of the team. But I think he can get the touchdowns and become solidified tight end one if he stays on the field all year.
Yeah, this is, like you said, it's not a sleeper team. I want to hear yours, Walker.
Yeah, I mean, oddly enough, with Njoku, just turned 23 years old on July 10th, his 3rd year in the league. I mean, it's such an unfinished product coming out. He's frustrating to say the least, because I just wanted more out of him, as we've kind of seen Ingram and OJ Howard realize. But Njoku is certainly in a prime position where there's no way teams are going to be able to focus on him. But I kind of went with the chalk here, I think, and it's Baker Mayfield. He is as QB5, again, just referencing everything Fantasy Pros ECR right here, but he was a QB2 last year, and only probably because he didn't start at the beginning of the season with Tyrod Taylor, because Hugh Jackson's an asshole and wanted to keep Baker Mayfield out of our lives for as long as possible. But with the offense, those are the guys we just said, no one's a sleeper on this team anymore. He has one of the best receiving corps probably in the NFL, with Beckham, Landry, has Antonio Callaway. You reference Higgins. There's Njoku. There's Damian Harris, as Demetrius Harris, as a secondary tight end. Chubb is a decent pass catcher. Duke Johnson, when fucking Kareem Hunt comes back after his suspension, I mean, just weapons galore on this team.
Seth DeValve isn't awful either.
And there you go, Seth DeValve just got talked about on this podcast. I mean, Baker Mayfield, has some rushing chops. He's not going to be, a league leader as far as, rushing is concerned, but I think he can return. He can be the top, QB this year. I mean, 40 touchdown upside is certainly in his range of outcomes. So, breaking out is all relative. It's all a matter of perspective. I mean, Joe Mixon was my breakout from the running back position as running back 9 in Bengals. Mayfield's now QB5, and I think he can be better than that. So I still think he has room to break out.
And man, he's laid it out there. My breakout is going to be Freddie Kitchens, because we don't know what we're going to get.
I love it.
You like that one, huh? I had to really think hard on that one. But, for how hyped this team is, everyone seems to forget it's kind of all in his hands. He's going to be the one, doing it all. So I'm hoping for a breakout, and I'm sure everyone else is. Let's go to our bust real quick. Walker.
Jarvis Landry.
John.
Go fuck yourself.
I went with Odell Beckham Jr. I think he's obviously one of the best wide receivers in football, but for all the reasons Walker just said, why he thinks Mayfield's going to break out, I think there's just too many mouths to feed unless they decide to run the entire offense through him. I just don't see him getting the volume. Landry's going to command targets. Higgins and Callaway are going to get theirs. And Njoku's going to get his share. They have plenty of pass catchers out of the backfield. I just don't see him voluming his way into that wide receiver one conversation.
I mean, you guys kind of brought it up. Mine, it hurts to say just because I still own them everywhere, so it won't be too bad. But Njoku could be another bust this year with all the mouths to feed. Shit, everyone could be a bust on this team. Just depends on what Freddie decides to do. Let's go to records real quick. I went 10-6. John?
9-7.
Walker?
Odell Beckham will have 150 targets this year.
He's not giving up.
that aside, I went with 10-6 as well for the Cleveland Browns.
All right, so let's see. Well, this is going to be interesting to see who we pick to win the division. But let's go to the next one, which is the one and only Pittsburgh Steelers. They've been the favorites year after year to win the division. Walker, what'd they do in the draft this year?
They put a decent emphasis on offense in the draft this year. I mean, their first-round pick was a linebacker that should return IDP value. But from an offensive perspective, which this fantasy community is still much more offensive focused, they added quite a few guys. I'm not going to name the two obvious ones because they might make appearances later on in this episode. I went with Zach Gentry, tight end out of Michigan. Big man at 6'8", 265 pounds. Anyone that listens to this podcast knows I'm a huge Vance McDonald fan, but at the same time, Vance McDonald also has difficulty staying on the field. Only averages 12 games played per year over a 6-year career. And they have Precious Little behind him since they let Jeff C. James leave town, and I'm not an Xavier Grimble guy, so although a rookie, I think Zach Gentry has appeal. Again, it's injury specific, but that was more of a dynasty shout out that I think that's someone that can be had extremely late. And John's referencing 2 tight end leagues. Him and I are in a few. He's a guy that I think you can stash on your taxi squad for a year or two and might pay dividends.
All right, John, what do you got?
I stayed on the defensive side. I love Devin Bush. I'm a Michigan guy, and that kid can fly sideline to sideline. So as an inside linebacker and someone who's going to be able to move all over the field, he's super athletic. I think you're going to see some pretty impressive totals from him year one.
He has questionable fashion sense, though.
Most of these guys do now.
Dude,
I'm old, and these kids are weird.
Yeah, they got some tight. I don't know what's going on these days. Tight pants and loose shirts. I'm like, what the fuck is this?
He's going with like kind of a karate professional.
It reminds me of
aesthetic at that draft.
They're almost wearing what fucking David Bowie wore in the lap.
Nailed it.
Like, look, twirling your crystal balls. But I do like me some Bush after a lot of people didn't like it. But what he did to the Michigan State field. Oh yeah, you like that one too? I like. We've got Bush, but
Bush and man sandwiches.
Oh my, yeah,
we get show title.
What's coming next? Let's go to the free agents, and Walker's got one of my favorites jotted down of the year. So why don't you talk about your free agents?
Yeah, listen, I'll just drop the name and then you can speak about him because Dante Moncrief was the only notable free agent addition that I could come up with off the top of my head. I didn't scour their wire, but he's someone that should have opportunity in their wide receiver core. So why don't you slobber all over him?
Yeah, I mean, it's just we saw what James Washington kind of brought to the table. I was expecting more last year. Everyone just thinks he's the incumbent number 2 just because he was there and Moncrief wasn't. Then you have Deontay Johnson in the conversation as well. I'm sure we'll talk about him a little bit. But I think Dante is a bigger guy, and he's going to definitely win the number 2 spot outside. And I think Ben, he's already been speaking on him, saying he's trusting him. So I love me, and I will slobber all over some Moncrief. I think this is it. This is the year. John's shaking his head no. Who's yours?
He was the only guy they brought in.
Yeah.
I understand what there is to like. I'm just not a fan.
Oh man, I know neither of you are. Let's get to the sleepers, and John, you can start us off there.
I went with James Washington. I think this team has a history of drafting and developing wide receivers. I don't see any reason not to suspect James Washington is not the next guy in a long line of Pittsburgh wide receiver draftees who succeed at the NFL level.
Walker?
Yeah, I mean, just doubling down. I mean, I'm not anti Moncrief. We've seen him be productive when he's had quality quarterback play, and now he comes, with Ben Roethlisberger an opportunity. So I'm not anti Moncrief. I don't think many are as high on him as you are, but I went with James Washington as well. And the sleeper, just echoing everything John said, is they have a track record of success drafting receivers. It's definitely not going to be Deontay Johnson in his rookie year, and the only one standing in Washington's way is Moncrief. So, if he can continue that lineage of draftable wide receivers in that Pittsburgh offense, I think he has sleeper appeal as wide receiver 54 currently.
Yeah. My guy, I'm not giving up on just quite yet because he's still there. Does a lot of special teams things for him. But in his limited role last year, I mean, the guy was catching the ball, getting first downs. And,
no.
Yes. It kind of reminded me of when they had Rodgers. And I think Switzer could step into that role. Little Ryan Switzer in the slot. So I know Juju is predominantly playing in the slot, but they can move Switzer around, get the defense moving around. So that's a deep sleeper. Shit. I didn't say he's going to be wide receiver 1, but, he could have a little bit of value.
What is his ceiling? Wide receiver what? Be realistic, too.
28.
What? Why 28?
Yeah.
Holy Moses.
I mean, we're acting like Antonio Brown didn't get a shitload of targets and they're going to split it up between Moncrief and Washington. I think Switzer can get some burn and make some things happen. But that's as high as the ceiling would go. It's definitely vaulted ceilings. So.
Christ. Okay. I don't know that wide receiver 128's in his range of outcomes this year. So
man,
you do not give up easy on guys.
I was going to say 48 if you're really putting a gun to my head.
Jesus. All right, Switzer, don't let me down, bro. Don't let me down.
Might not make the team.
Shut your
All right.
mouth when you're talking to me. Let's go to the breakouts. Mine is also. I'm just joking. Let's go. Walker, you're up first.
This one's easy. Jalen Samuels. Currently running back 51. So disrespected by just about everyone but this podcast. I love Jalen Samuels. He proved it last year that he could handle a workload and that he is dynamic and multiple, which is why we all liked him. He provides far more multiplicity than a certain someone else in that backfield, in my humble opinion. And I think he is going to eat this year. He will be a flexy running back week in and week out. And I think he easily has top 36 running back floor this season in PPR leagues, and getting drafted as wide receiver 51. That is significant value. I mean, 15 pick upside, I believe, is his floor this year.
Yeah, I think in unison, we all should have just said Jalen Samuels at the same time there. John, unless you have somebody different.
I've got someone named Jalen Samuels.
Yeah,
but this is a Jalen Samuels certified podcast. That guy's a fucking stud. He's arguably the best running back on the team, best football player on this entire team. He's an amazing athlete. People are just selling him short. He is going to get on the field this year and make everyone shut up about James Conner.
In a perfect world. I think we're all on board there for the breakout. We all said Jalen Samuels, so go out if you don't, especially while he's still relatively cheap. If you're, a dynasty guy listening right now, I know this is redraft, but this is probably going to be the cheapest you're going to get Samuels right now.
That's true.
So, bust. I can't wait for this. Who wants to go first? Time to put this guy in a bag and punch the shit out of him.
I'll go first because I don't have the same one as you guys. Dante Moncrief is garbage. That guy is no good. Andrew, you can cheer for him all you would like. He is he's got an amazing agent. How this guy keeps getting $10 million 1-year contracts is beyond me. But he's not good. He's not good at football. And he's done it time and time again. Hit the bricks, Dante Moncrief.
Good thing I can edit that out. Walker?
Goodness gracious.
Go ahead.
All right. I mean, I thought we all had agreed prior to this podcast of specifically with the Steelers who was going to be our breakouts and busts. So I'm not very happy that John decided to divert. But before I shit on this guy, I just want to speak more highly about Jalen Samuels. And Jalen Samuels ran a 4.54 40 at 6 foot 225 pounds, which translated to a 105.9 83rd percentile speed score. Yes, fast for his size and certainly more dynamic than people want to give him credit for. He's also a hell of a pass catcher. So,
and his pass blocking was not too bad as the year went on.
Not to get off subject, but as big as he is he fucking faster than Kalen Balazs? We'll have to look that up.
I will compare them and put it on our Fantasy 40 profile from Player Profiler. That will be my job today, and I think I can accomplish it. But bust James Conner.
Oh, yeah.
RB8. Give me a break. Joe Mixon, I mentioned earlier, is RB9.
Oh, my God.
Every day, I will take Joe Mixon over James Conner. I get that he had a very productive start to the season, shot out of a cannon. Everyone was in love with this guy. Who the fuck cares about Le'Veon Bell? It's the system. Let's all just marry James Conner. He's a good person. He's done countless other things for people to love him, other than the fact that he hit a wall, got injured, and started losing touches to Jalen Samuels at the end of the year. And I don't think they're going to revert to their old ways of just giving their primary back 80, 90% of touches. I think those days have come and gone. To me, James Conner is not an RB1. He is a high-end RB2 who is touchdown dependent at this point in time, especially in PPR leagues, because he's going to lose a lot of that passing volume. And they drafted Benny Snell, who we did not talk about at all.
Right.
Like him or not, they committed draft capital to Benny Snell. He is going to get touches in this offense as well. The long gone are the days of the bell cow back in Pittsburgh.
Yep, 100% agree with everything you said. I'm just getting tired of people on this guy's nuts. I mean, yes, he was productive, but Jesus, it's like, give the guy a break. And you're right, he did hit a wall. And then, not to make light of, his situation and his health coming out of Pittsburgh, but people are saying that has something to do with it. I just think he's just not ready to carry the full load, and that's why, like you said, they drafted Benny Snell. I don't know. I guess I'm negative. This podcast is turning me into a negative Nancy. It's like if everyone likes somebody, I'm like, I fucking hate that guy. Excuse my language, but
he's got the shittiest haircut in the league.
True. Anything
I
you
think it goes too far sometimes.
Right.
It's like it almost has to be this group think, and it's okay to not like someone or think they're overvalued. And that's just where I fall with Conner. I saw things I guess other people didn't over the course of last season. And then every move that the Steelers have made after that has shown me that they don't want to burden him with the workload that they gave previous running backs. And that's what people are drafting on. They're like, oh, Pittsburgh back, RB8. No.
That is absurd, though. I didn't even talk about the ADP. Just seeing him go in the first round is like blowing my mind. Just like, it's fucking James Conner, dude. Did you see him in college? He wasn't anything great there. So he just going to morph into a NFL superstar? No, thank you.
Yeah, he was pretty good in college, but
he grinded. I mean, I watched a lot of Pittsburgh games because they're always on ESPN, but I'm not. It's nothing that was like, oh man, it wasn't LaShawn McCoy at Pittsburgh,
Listen, he's not Darren Hall, that's for sure.
That's true too.
Shout out to Darren Hall. What could have been?
Okay, you got anything to chime in about James Conner, John, before we give out the records?
Hate his haircut, and everyone's completely unreasonable. All offseason, everything that leaked out from the players on that team were, we're going to do a little more two-back sets. We started doing it at the end of last season, but didn't work it into our game plans, and they all said it. Everyone said it. And then they bring in Jalen Samuels, college coach. Everything they've done and said says they're doing running back by committee, but people just refuse to believe it.
That's exactly right. Okay, we'll go to the records. And Walker, go ahead.
I went with 10-6, much as I did with Cleveland Browns. So we'll talk after records about who I think wins the division.
Yeah. So John, go ahead.
A shocking 12-4.
Damn. Okay. So I'm not going to sit here and change my answer because Walker can see every move I'm making, but I was at 10-6. I was actually going to bump it up to 11-5. I think they win the division, obviously, because I had the Browns at 10-6 coming in second in the division. Matt, what do you got?
I have the Cleveland Browns winning the division.
All right, so
I believe top to bottom, they're a more talented team than the Pittsburgh Steelers are at present.
yeah, it's still Cleveland for me. I got to see it to believe it. John, you had it looks like you have the Steelers winning. Why?
Pittsburgh, Baltimore, Cleveland, Cincy. Like I said, I printed out a whole season schedule, went game by game, and tallied up the wins and losses. I didn't think I liked Pittsburgh that much, but I have them going 12-4.
Wow. So that's pretty interesting. We did it. The AFC North is complete. We went a
So
little
much
long,
for John being a Baker Mayfield guy.
right?
Hey,
Lose it. It's
like
done.
I said,
It's over.
Yeah, that was a short-lived one, but we got it done. We went a little long on the Steelers just because of one James Conner, but that was fun. What do we got next, Walker? Where are we going next?
John thought we should just go via a compass, I assume,
Yes,
and
sir.
how much most people speak to directionality. So we will be heading down to the AFC South next week,
Ooh,
which should be extremely interesting.
that'll be a fun one.
That is a good set of teams, in my opinion. So
There's plenty of talk about the Titans, the Colts, the Jags. Oh, this is gonna be a good one. And then the Houston.
not even talking about the Texans. Yeah, and, Lamar Miller stinks, and Deshaun Watson can be QB1 overall, and everything that comes with that.
Hopefully, I think Hopkins and Watt are just resting on the pup list, so we'll get to that next week. But we want to thank our partners once again over at Full Time Fantasy Network. Appreciate everything you guys do over there. For myself, Andrew Burke, John DeBari, Matt Walker, we are the Fantasy 40, and we're signing off. I don't want to be caught saying I want to punch somebody in the face, but I definitely want to punch them in the face. I want to Joe Mixon them. But so
Speaking of, let's dive into the AFC North.